maids, au pairs, gardeners, babysitters, and other domestic workers to the wealthy. What's the weirdest thing you've seen rich people do behind closed doors? Gosh, where to start? The wife was driving through the home improvement part of the city and saw a sale on bathtubs. So she popped in and bought 3. As she was leaving, she saw another tub she liked and simply had to get that one too. She wasn't renovating a house at the time. They refused to throw away food used by and best before dates are completely ignored, to the point where I found a tin of seafood marinara which was 15 years out of date. They have a holiday home in the South Pacific and have a housekeeper clean it 3 times a week, yet they only visit 3 to 4 times a year. When they are not visiting, no one lives there. When the family go out for dinner, the father will happily pay for the expensive meals, but not the drinks. The kids, who are all teens or older, have to pay him back for the drinks and he will send reminder messages about the amount. Yet when any of the kids offer to pay for the meal, he won't accept. The wife is a hoarder and will often take way more samples than any normal person. She always makes sure to take all the shampoo/soap etc. from hotel rooms, and if she passes a housekeeping trolley, will grab as many as she can from there too. Yet she never uses them. They have a whole bathroom cupboard dedicated to samples. I've only babysat one time, and it was for a friend of my grandparents. All I really had to do was hang out with their 8-year-old grandson for a night. Overall it was a pretty cool night. All we did was play 2K and Madden all night, so it wasn't bad. But anyway, this family wasn't like billionaire wealthy, but wealthy enough to where they left me an envelope with $500 in it and told me whatever I don't spend on food, I can keep. Wealthy enough to have sped off in a Maserati for the dinner they were at. Wealthy enough to have a pool, jacuzzi, a nice BBQ built into the backyard out back. You get the idea. They were just an old couple with some money, and they were taking their grandson's parents out to dinner one particular night. Leave me with $500, so I think to myself, I might as well splurge like 30 or 40 bucks on a meal for 2 and pocket the rest. I was like 17 or 18 at the time, so I can't say it was a negligible amount of money. Anyway, I take the kid outside to my car across the street, which, at the time, was my older brother's 2005 Toyota Corolla. He gets in, takes a look around, and goes, "Where's the button that moves the roof back?" "Sorry kid, no convertible here." He tells me that his parents only have convertible cars, and that he's only been in one other car that isn't a convertible, and that he isn't my friend anymore. I thought that was pretty weird. Throughout the night, he did also make some interesting rich kid comments, such as asking if we could go to a restaurant that had steak on the menu. He revealed an interesting bit about his parents, saying that they keep talking about bringing him a sister when the time is right. Apparently the kid asked the dad when the right time was, and he said when mommy stops being afraid. I then learned that the kid's mom and dad divorced about a year later. Felt bad. He was a cool kid, didn't really have that cheaty spoiled vibe. More like an innocent, curious, steered wrong by his parents vibe. The most bizarre was this newly rich young family in Vienna. The bedtime routine for the kids, aged 3 and 7, included basically a spa treatment for both. I haven't seen that amount of products in a child's bathroom. They each had their own, in my life. The poor 7-year-old girl had next to no hair on her head, but I was required to slather her in the most expensive adult shampoo, conditioner, hair mask, hair oil, and some other things I didn't recognize, every night. They only had one tiny box of toys and time spent playing was set up for 30 minutes after they brushed their teeth. Dinner was normally a bland fish fillet and a ton of salad. Not a grain of sugar anywhere in the house. Hot cocoa was made with skim milk and pure high quality cocoa, no sweetness to it whatsoever. It tasted awful. They had time to explain everything to me the first time I was there, and I received an inch-thick file with lists and procedures to follow. What they didn't mention was that the older girl was still wearing diapers at night. It made for a very awkward conversation with the child, and I only hope I was sensitive enough to not cause her any future trauma. During the summer, while I was on vacation from college, I helped my mom at her first landscaping/greenhouse job. We went to this particular lady's house in the rich part of town, big antebellum home, She was a realtor and all that jazz. We called her Dragon Lady because she looked like a wrinkly old dragon and she hoarded the most ridiculous jewelry and always wore it. Even in her pajamas. We were taking a job to fix up, replace nice shrubs and flowers that she was just tired of, her backyard. She was a terrible excuse of a human. Mean-spirited, snide comments, the works. But she had an inordinate amount of fresh young men always in and out of her house. Like the entire time we were there. Quite the variety. And if we ran into one she always introduced them as her cousins and we were like, yeah, okay, sure, you old crusty bag. She would flounce around in sheer robes with little to cover anything underneath. The guys followed her around the house like they were on a leash. It was like she wanted us to see her because she was always in her sunroom being doted on by her cousins, putting lotion on her reptilian skin, bringing her drinks, food, etc. Then when she was done with them, a slick nice Mercedes would pick them up. We only witnessed the car a couple times, but man, she was weird and gross. She's probably a fossil by now, I guess. She was a relic then, and that was only like 7 years ago. I worked as a live-in nanny for a young couple and their 2 kids. The father was 28 and owned his own record label for Mexican artists and easily made $3 to $4 mil per year. The mother was 26 and was famous on Instagram for flaunting their lavish lifestyle. They lived in a huge house in the middle of the desert, probably 30 minutes outside of the city they designed themselves, and it was honestly ridiculous. Each bedroom was so big it echoed and had its own private walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom, as well as access to a wraparound balcony that overlooked the courtyard. It was shaped like an hacienda. It had glass elevators, an indoor koi pond in the entryway, and in the courtyard they literally had a stage for the live music to perform when they had parties, and a covered sitting area big enough to accommodate 30 tables. Their kitchen had a walk-in refrigerator and enough ovens/stoves to run a restaurant. On the roof they had a helipad and the guy owned like 4 helicopters. He had a Maserati, 2 Ferraris, one for his wife, and one for him, and a rose gold Range Rover. They had parties every weekend. And not just cute cozy dinner parties. I'm talking 200 to 300 person, get so sheet-faced you can barely stand parties. Live band, a Mexican music genre, so loud you can't hear yourself think. Men in little groups taking strange pills. Women all screaming and laughing, gossiping at the table as they bounced babies on their knees, etc. There was one party where the father decided to challenge 3 of his guests to a race behind his house in the desert with his Ferrari, and it flipped, but he was fine and was just pissed his car was damaged. There was another where people started jumping from the 2nd story balcony to the pool/fountain in the middle of the courtyard and a guy broke his foot. I always had to attend these parties to watch the kids, get them juice when they said they were thirsty, supervise when they played with other kids, tuck them into bed when it got late and the adults were getting too wild for the kids to see. Every single weekend, the mother and father would fight and get into screaming matches. Usually the mother was mad he was making stupid decisions while under the influence, usually correct, and he would insist he was fine and she needed to stop trying to control him. She would go to bed mad, he'd stay up until 6 AM and finally crash then, and the next day they'd be fine like nothing happened. The mother was a very beautiful, mostly sweet though kind of airheaded girl who had gotten with the father in high school and loved to talk about how she went through highs and lows with him, even when they lived with his parents. She had an affinity for drama, and if there was a problem, she was all up in it. She pretended to hate the constant parties, but also seemed to love the drama that came with them. She was absurdly glamorous and had a private makeup artist who did her makeup every day for Instagram, and she took him with her on vacations and everything. She had a ridiculous amount of clothes and shoes and would spend easily over $5K maybe every 2 weeks on shopping. She was super attached to her mom and her mom visited every day, as well as her 6 sisters. In fact, the both of them were attached to their families. The father also had his brother, sister, mother and all of his cousins he grew up with at the house daily. They practically lived there. Overall a very ditzy but well-meaning person. The father? Not so much. Apparently he was an asshole before the money, but after it only got worse. Loves partying, loves showing off materialistic things, doing dangerous things, that is drag racing, and had no real regard for the well-being of his wife or kids, because he assumed they'd be fine with his antics, as long as he flung money at them. The guy wasted an excess amount of money fully staffing his house, so he wouldn't have to do anything himself. He claimed it was because he was very busy with work running his label. He'd relax for 2 weeks straight, fly out to Mexico for 2 days, then repeat. Not a very demanding schedule. His staff included 2 cooks, 3 housekeepers, an assistant for the mother and an assistant for him, a nanny, that was me, a planner, the lady that makes their parties happen, and plans their vacations and other stuff, and 4 security guards to watch his house. Seriously, he was super paranoid somebody was going to attack his house. Had a full-on security system with intricate locks to every door leading to the outside and security cameras and beefy, burly armed guards walking back and forth around his property. I worked for them for around 2.5 years. It was an easy enough job taking care of the kids as they were both under the age of 6 and were actually pretty well behaved despite the environment they were growing up in. Easy for a child to get spoiled and bratty, just a little girl and boy. Watching all the antics unfold was pretty entertaining. It was like having a front row seat to a real life soap opera. But in the end, it turned out the security guards were for good reason, because the house ended up getting raided by the police twice on suspicion he was a drug dealer, but never found any evidence, and some men tried breaking into the house and sent death threats. I really don't think he himself was a drug dealer. He made so much money from his legal business that he didn't need to, and he was probably too much of a wuss to do that anyway, but he definitely causally hung out with them, and I'm positive they were guests at his parties, and mixing with that just brings problems. I quit after the death threats fiasco, because I feared for my own safety. I feel bad for the kids. I was about 16 and babysitting for an obviously well-off family. Father was a lawyer, not sure what the mother did. Weird couple. She was lanky and maybe 6 inches taller than him. He was short and fat and just a grumpy dude. Their 2 sons were wretched spoiled brats. They paid well, so I continued to babysit for them on and off for maybe 6 months. While I was admittedly snooping around this guy's office, I found a very intriguing treasure box about waist high on one of his several bookshelves. It wasn't locked, and the contents are making me laugh as I type this. About ½ ounce of pot pink vibrator metal cork ring, but plug several different types of pills scattered around the box, couple dozen Polaroids from what looked like a weird BDSM party in the 80s, including the couple doing weird fetish shit. Was hard to look them in the eyes after they got back that night. Both because I smoked a joint of his grass, and because I couldn't get the image of this lawyer with a bull gag getting paddled by his wife out of my head. I'm a male, and I used to babysit for people on my street when I was a teenager of about 14 or so. Male babysitters, I found out, were a hot commodity for parents of male kids. I would play sports and video games with them, not that female babysitters can't, but they tended not to. One family of 2 boys was rather well off. They had a big house and 2 really nice cars. The parents bought these kids literally every toy. The basement rec room was like a Toys R Us store, with half the stuff opened and half still in boxes. On the first day I discovered the Lego. Tons of it, and almost all unopened. I asked the boys why they hadn't played with the Lego, and they kinda said, "We kinda just haven't gotten around to it yet." Judging by all the toys around, I can believe that. "Well, we are going to play the fuck out of this Lego today," I said, without actually saying fuck. We cleared off some space on the coffee table and dumped out every box. We threw the instructions aside and built the biggest space station that 40 odd Lego sets can build. I even came back a couple days when I wasn't working just to build and play Lego with the boys. They had a ton of fun and became Lego maniacs like me. TLDR, parents bought the boys so many toys, they didn't even open the boxes of Lego. I was a live-in groundskeeper for a wealthy eccentric for a while. He had 3 cars from old movies in his garage. One was from a Bond film. They were covered in layers of dust and trash. One of them was a convertible that had the top caved in by trash. Or some cars just totally neglected and forgotten. He also had a favorite dog kept frozen in a meat cooler, surrounded by decade-old frozen food items. I know about this stuff because the garage is where my equipment was. I only saw inside the proper house once. I lived in the keeper's housing. It was full of all this crystal, pewter, and silver tabler and decorative stuff. Easily hundreds of thousands of dollars in items just laying around in piles, like a faking pirate movie. He was rarely there anyway. Once every 3 months he would swing in to pay bills and take care of other shit, then go back to France where he lived with his wife. A lesser man than I cold made out like a bandit just taking things here and there. The guy wouldn't have even noticed. I just did my job though. Even improved his property because the guy before me was a lazy stoner. I was a stoner too, but I was the busybody kind. When you have the opportunity to be in people's homes, behind the scenes, or before they have been cleaned, you learn things about them. If you have a housekeeper, he or she will see all your stuff. They will pretend they don't, or that seeing it, or dealing with it is totally usual. Sometimes, it's not. Sometimes people are faked up, and you get to see what their friends and family don't see. People had a spa bath that had actual physical and visible mushrooms growing from the grouting. About 15 cms tall. Fascinating. Have worked around drug paraphernalia, guns, sex toys, unflushed toilets and exotic pets that were just hanging out. I've cleaned up around leopard skins, coral, taxidermy eagles, shark's jaws, tortoise and turtle shells and a stuffed bear which is totally faking weird as I live in NZ. A couple who had taken out the innards from their many smoke alarms and installed hidden cameras in them throughout the house. The one thing that irks me to this day is being yelled at by crazy high guy in his undies re his cacti. They sat in full sun. Their house is beachfront. He was pissed the cheap cacti in plastic pots were not thriving and was convinced it was because I wasn't watering them enough. Size. Their pot dirt was always sodden. Heh. Can't win 'em all. I worked for an insanely wealthy woman in court, and she was just as crazy as she was rich. She was elderly. When I worked for her as a personal assistant, my job was mostly researching the location of the Shroud of Christ. Yes, the Shroud of Christ. She was a devout Catholic, and she had a slew of creepy religious freaks working for her too. She'd call me on speakerphone first thing every morning from her room and I'd have to go through every email, including spam, that she got. Took me a few weeks to realize why she was always grunting during our interaction. It was her morning dump routine. She had some sort of skin condition that covered her entire body with open sores that constantly oozed and flaked. It was so bad that her maid changed her sheets 3 times a day, as that's where she conducted most of her business. Besides the strange religious employees, 3 secretaries and maid, her mentally handicapped daughter lived with her mother still and somehow her boyfriend moved in, and her mother was tricked into signing the rights to her daughter's boyfriend, so he was there too, and he was also mentally handicapped. One of her workers told me that her daughter was born with one leg shorter than the other, so her mom had her shorter leg amputated, and it's what drove her daughter to insanity. Crazy times. Mobile dog groomer. I went to an old rock star's house to groom his dog. He was never home, but his wife was always there. Always. She wanted me to drive my mobile grooming van, with tub, shampoos, dryers, account, how to her house 30 miles away, get out of the van, go into her house. I had to wear those glove booties that go on your feet, like you see in hospitals, use their shampoo, which was just human shampoo from Whole Foods, use their hair dryer, but only on low and never on hot, use her brushes and combs, which were human ones, and didn't work on the dog, and wash the dog in her sink. While she would randomly go through the house with her housekeeper cleaning a house that was already clean and reorganizing the same 10 bookshelves, she would randomly sneak behind me and watch me groom her dog, which was just standing there with the hairdryer for an hour trying to dry the dog. I wasn't allowed to touch the dog's toys. If he brought me one I was to ignore it. The dog was being overwashed, and they were using a shampoo that was making it worse. They blamed allergies and replaces their backyard grass with fake grass. Then when I was finished I would wipe everything down and wait at the door. She would write me a check for $40, no tip, and then try and talk to me about whatever for an hour. The best day ever with her was she was going to the airport and let me, and said just ask the maid for permission to go when you're done, and then she left for the airport. The maid wandered in 10 minutes later and was like, that beach is gone for a month. I'm going home. Lock the door after yourself. Bye. So I took the dog to my van, actually got it groomed in about 20 minutes, returned it, and then wandered around their house. Saw the original art for some of the dude's albums. Took a piss in his toilet and then looked through his medicine cabinet. Turns out I think he had a stroke, judging by his meds, which would explain a lot. Otherwise it was kinda empty and sad. Few family photos, nothing exciting. I tried to fire her as a client, but the owners were so starstruck that they got to groom dog, even though it was me. When I quit, the owners and the rock star's wife had a big blow up. She wrote them a check in advance for his next 2 months of grooms and told them not to cash it till X date, but she cancelled it before they could cash it. She was obviously mentally ill and needed help, but years of money and fame and no one telling her no have ruined any chances of that. I mostly felt bad for that dog. They overwashed it, and that's what is causing 90% of the problems. Forgive my spelling. I'm dumb. Hints. It's a dude. He's old. He was on a reality TV show, not British. Worked for a billionaire family. The missus could no longer have children biologically and had used donor eggs for her youngest. She cornered me one day and said, "I've always wanted Eurasian children. I think they're the most beautiful people." She goes on and on about wanting them and thinking about finding an egg donor. I'm Asian American. She has a staff of 20 plus people at her house. Why did she feel the need to corner me to tell me this? It was one of the most uncomfortable 15 minutes of my life. In her spare time, which was all the time, she studied many subjects. One of them was gemology. One day, while on a trip to a poor country rich in gems and minerals, she decided she to go shopping for gems. The pricing for these gems would have been a fraction of retail. The mister gave her a budget of $50,000. Immediately, she tells him that she did not go to gemology school for just $50,000. Immediately, he upped her budget to $120,000. Minus $8,000 spent on one order for solid white playtime t-shirts for her toddlers. That being said, they compensated their staff quite well. I received a decent salary, medical/vision/dental insurance, a 401k, and a clothing allowance in case I needed anything for work. I was an au pair for a British-Spanish couple in London. They raised their daughter trilingual and even sent her to a German school. But because the school finished 2 to 3 hours before British schools, the mum thought it was okay to make little Helena study at home. So each day, I would have to take a sheet of paper and document the times and how well Helena did at the following tasks: German reading, German writing, English reading, English writing, guitar exercise, lunch, what she ate, how she behaved, playtime. Once I was finished with her, it was bedtime, and mum would take her to her room and make her read in Spanish. Her weekends were filled with acting school, ballet and so on. Her parents planned to send her off to a private school in Germany within 1 to 2 years, and the mum told me she plans to send Helena to Oxford University. Helena was never allowed around a friend's house, but she was allowed to have a friend over on a Friday for a few hours. Aside from this playtime, her whole life revolved around getting good grades. We lived in Putney, which is just a bus ride away from all the famous museums. Yet, Helena was not allowed on public transport. The worst part was, the parents would literally not acknowledge her until she had finished all her tasks. Several times, the mum worked from home and would, I am not exaggerating, push Helena away if Helena wanted a hug. Why? Well, because we were in the middle of one of her many tasks. One day mum wanted me to teach Helena how to write essays. Helena was faking 7 years old. She had difficulty integrating into the school because she was quite literally the only non-German pupil as far as I knew. She had no sense of identity and was just a little psycho who was so attached to anybody who gave her attention, me, that I would have to tell her off and get her parents involved because she wouldn't let me go to the toilet. Like a puppy, she would wait outside the door once we had managed to get her to let go of my leg. It was an absolute freak show. I lasted 4 months before I gave up. Helena had a big mental breakdown when she saw her mum at home, and mum didn't acknowledge her. So I went up to her bedroom office and told her I quit. Then I texted my previous AU pair mum, and she came to pick me up within 3 hours. This previous AU pair mum is still my close friend, 10 years on. Helena should be 18 now, and I really wonder how she has turned out. I was a nanny for a rich family with 3 kids. I came every Saturday and the parents explained how they did things. They first spoke only in French to the kids. I thought this was weird but cool, good way to teach the kids a second language. Well, this is not cool when they kids would just get up and talk to the mom in French, and I had no clue what they were saying, and about half the time it was a complaint about me. I was told not to use the word no or can't, and if I was to tell the children they couldn't do something I should avoid it at all costs. But if I need to, it's got to have a positive spin on it. These 3 kids all wanted to do opposite things all at the same time and none of them were allowed to hear no. So when one wanted to stand on dad's brand new pool table, while the other wanted to play with the stapler, I was supposed to have a happy positive spin on it, but not say no. These kids never heard of consequences a day in their little life. The little girl wanted Cheerios and a block of Parmesan cheese for lunch. I tried to suggest maximum and cheese. The mom corrected me and said she could have what she wanted. When she WD take a bite of the Parmesan cheese, she WD throw a Cheerio on the floor and look at me and smile because she knew I had to clean it up. As I swept, she did it more and more. The parents would have me over so they could bike for 100+ miles. I get if that's what they want to do, but legit they worked all week and had nanny and housekeepers, and Saturday comes and they don't want to sleep in and hang out with Johnny and Susie and little Tim. They didn't allow TV, but on rare occasions they did. It was usually a movie that doesn't have words or old French films. They also were potty training the 9-month-old. Yes, the 9-month-old, and they expected me to run with this kid when he started peeing and sit him or hold him over the toilet. This kid did not wear diapers and was mostly naked all the time as he peed on anything as he was 9 months old. He pooped on the floor often too. This house was an eye-opener. I never seen such odd people. They also accused the maid of stealing a cup for like 5 hours and had this huge fight about it. The husband threw such a hissy fit. They found the cup in the dishwasher. Pathetic. Not domestic worker, but used to do a lot of hospitality work in very high-end hotels. Rich people get up to the weirdest shit, especially when it isn't their own home. Served a full 3-course meal for 2 tiny dogs once. That was faking ridiculous, and I was so close to telling them what I thought, but I needed to keep my job. I did get a nice tip out of it. When I was a valet/driver, I frequently picked up guests who were blatantly high on something, talking shit and generally a mess. Found one guy in the parking lot, completely naked apart from Doc Martens, holding the keys to his luxury sports car. Managed to talk him down after a while, snuck him back up to his room, and made him hot chocolate before getting him into bed. Saw him the next day and he couldn't look me in the eye. My favorite has to be when I was dropping off some luggage to a guest's room by request. Hotel policy was never let the guests lift a finger, etc. I knock. A red-faced sweaty guy opens the door a crack and whispers, "What do you want?" And I hear a woman say, "Just tell them to go away." After explaining myself, the guy tells me to wait, shuts the door, then opens it. I tramp in with my cold weather gear and boots and dump the kit in the corner whilst the woman is holding a sheet up to cover herself, and there's a faking mountain of what I later presumed to be cocaine on the dressing table. I left after asking if there was anything else I could do with a smug grin and a hastily unrolled note in my pocket. My friend and I, only one of us got paid. We just went together anyway. Watched this 5-year-old boy for this pretty wealthy guy in my small hometown. The boy didn't speak, he clearly understood words and eventually did say a few to me when no one else was around. He was very bright. His dad had an AK-47 on top of the grandfather clock in the living room. One day when we were playing hide and seek, he took me into his dad's room and showed me a giant dildo. After that, when we were hiding, he was curled up on my lap and said some of the few words I ever heard out of him. Something like, "Just stay here," and I sat with him in the quiet. One time when his dad came home, he gave my friend and I hot damn or some sort of cinnamon sugary booze to drink and then took us down to a warehouse full of expensive cars and motorcycles. He took one out and offered us both a ride, but I said no as my friend zoomed around with him for a minute. I knew something wasn't right, but I was too afraid of getting in trouble to say anything. Besides, I didn't really have strong evidence that something was actually happening. Just that it probably had. Former AU pair, worked in Europe for a family of 5 with their kids, aged 9 to 13. I was mostly there to help them drive to activities / appointments / school, help them with their studies, cook dinner, etc. The mess that family created was insane. In addition, having me as an au pair, they also had a cleaning lady come in for several hours every weekday. I thought it was overkill having a cleaning lady that often, but going into the main house on weekends showed me why they needed so much help. In the kitchen there would be garbage on the floor, fruit peels, eggshells, wrappers, etc. Sink would be overflowing with dishes, dining room and coffee tables covered with used dishes and food containers, and then the bathroom. On more than one occasion I would see menstrual blood wiped on the walls. I can only imagine how bad the bedrooms were. Mind you, this was what I'd encounter on a Saturday, less than 24 hours after the cleaning lady had been there. By Sunday the main house was a disaster area. I felt so bad for the cleaning lady on Mondays, and would help her when my schedule allowed for it. If you had met them out in public, or come over on a day when the cleaning lady had just finished, you would never known. I was lucky enough to live in a studio apartment in the backyard, so I could limit the amount of time I spent in the main house outside of work hours. It's worth noting that both parents were medical professionals and very intelligent, but didn't seem to care much about cleanliness at home at the time. After their kids started leaving for university, the parents got better about cleaning up after themselves. At least it seems that way, based on my visits back over the years. And besides all this messiness, they were a wonderful family to work for. Still, they are the second messiest people I've ever encountered in my life so far. Was a nanny for about 6 months. Mom had a bad drinking problem and would often come home drunk from nights out with friends. One particular night I was taking a call while the kid was sleeping, so I step on the back porch. Didn't realize the door would automatically close and lock behind me. I called her repeatedly trying to tell her I had locked myself out of the house while her child was sleeping inside. She never answered, but I remembered she had introduced me to a neighbor who supposedly had a key. Turned out that he didn't, but he knew another neighbor who did, and he let me back in. She came home, crawled up the stairs reeking of tequila, told me I had to either break up my boyfriend and move in with her, or I couldn't work for her anymore. Subsequently fired me, and then when I told her I had locked myself out she started cracking up. She called me back the next morning apologizing and begging me to work for her again. Apparently I was also her personal chauffeur after she had plastic surgery, and she once rented me out to a friend for a Halloween party in which I was paid $80 to watch 10 plus children for 4 hours. On the bright side, she had too much to drink, so I got to drive her new BMW home. Probably the first and last time I'll drive a BMW. Oh, and I stopped working for her because I had to move to the other side of the state, and she texted me 5 months later trying to get me to do an overpass with her kid while she went out of town for a business trip. I would have spent more on gas and food than I would have gotten paid, plus I had a new job. Speaking of overnights, when I was first hired on, I was told that I would have to do overnights from time to time while she traveled to Chicago for business meetings. She told me I could just sleep in her bed with her daughter. Found that pretty strange, since she didn't even know me. Ended up doing it just because it was what her daughter was used to. Kid was a kicker and total blanket hog. Needless to say, a lot happened in that 6 months, and there's a reason I was never a nanny again. Edited to @ Side note, I learned that wealthy white people tend to have a particular smell to them. Can't tell you what it is, but they all smell like it. It's most noticeable in their clothing, so I assume it's some sort of laundry detergent, but their whole house smells like it too. I worked for a few rich people who owned estates, and I must say I saw no really weird stuff. I worked with thoroughbreds for decades and wound up house sitting for some families through word of mouth that I was reliable and honest. Except for spoiled children and some really bad portraits a la Trump, I saw no really outlandish behavior. Mostly a lot of ego and self-aggrandizement. One woman who could not ride for crap had a full life-sized portrait of herself in complete equestrian uniform. Lol, every day I had to ride a polite well-trained horse for an hour to quiet him, then help this woman, a retired ballerina, thought they were athletic, mount a 16-hand horse. But she had a portrait honoring her riding skills? That is the weirdest thing, how they fool themselves into believing they are so much better than others, because of birth or sharp business skills. One woman who barely graduated from high school, but inherited a fortune told me she was a great idea person. What that meant is beyond me, as all she did was live off of the inheritance, though she did sit on quite a few boards of institutions like universities, museums, and charities. She could not spell, do anything but basic math, and equated solid vet science with homeopathy and other snakial nostrums. Money opened every door she went through in her life. At least her family gave a lot to philanthropy. Late to the party, but my sister works for this more or less known actor. He had a huge success in the 90s. The guy is also a meme nowadays. Right now he also was a support actor in another well-known show. And he was himself in an original series kinda show too. Can't say which. Anyways, I can't give away more hints about this guy. He's pretty cool. Couple of times I went to his house because he was giving away some furniture. No biggie. This one time, I called my sister to tell her I'm outside. She said that he would answer the door and asked to be ready. I said, okay, whatever that means. I knocked on the door and there was this guy, balls naked, wet and sheet, and I was like, what the actual fuck? He says, hey, what's up, Blue Cat? You here for the sofa? I nervously say, yeah, yes I am. Okay, come on over. This is the one. Excuse me, where is my sister? My sister says, I'm right here, kitchen. Do you mind if I could just go talk to my sister for a bit? He said, yeah, no problem. I'll just go back to the pool, I said, still with what the fuck face. Okay, cool, enjoy. Got to my sister and asked why was he naked. She said, oh, they all like being naked around the house, or guess they already know. I got used to it by now anyways. Grabbed the sofa, went home, and the image of a naked famous guy still haunts me to this day. The dude had a perfect body, by the way. I envy the guy, not gonna lie. No wonder why he is faking famous. And yes, I looked at his dick. I mean, it was faking right there. Can't miss that sheet. TLDR, I went to a famous actor to pick up a sofa he was giving away. Sister said to be ready. Knocked on door. Saw the actor balls naked and wet. The guy and apparently his family likes being naked around people they already know or feel comfortable with. Grabbed the sofa he was giving away. Image of a naked guy still haunts me to this day. I used to work for a guy who would rant about the Tories and how they were faking up the country, quite rightly so, but would then get me to order a £200 Smithson diary knowing full well that they, Smithson, have strong financial links with the Conservatives. Not exactly behind closed doors, but he would usually try to ensure that he didn't have to mingle with the general public. Being rich, this was quite easy. If he had to attend an event in London, I'm not talking red carpet event, usually just a low-key schmoozing thing, I would be told to order a Rolls Royce and chauffeur for £1,700 to drive him to and from the event, so that he could avoid the 45-minute train ride or, God forbid, a taxi where he'd have to make small talk with someone who didn't know who he was. Once we were being driven in the RR, we'd just gotten to France on the ferry, and were going through Calais. The boss' son had brought his binoculars along to look at the poor people, seriously alienated through a privileged upbringing and completely emotionally disconnected from understanding other people's experiences. It's a shame that his father has had this effect on him, as he's otherwise a really pleasant and easygoing chapter. If you check in at Premier Inn and yell at the receptionist, smoke weed in the rooms, and make ridiculous demands, then you'll likely get asked to leave, or at the very least given some serious slant eye. But when you're paying however much a night at the Ritz, they will smile and yes sir to just about anything. So his life was orientated around trying to stay behind closed doors away from the public, avoiding people who might say no. Another one, we had two cleaners that would come each week and he'd decided he didn't like what they were wearing. Rather than tell them he wanted them to wear something different, he ranted about what they were wearing to just about everyone else in the office, before declaring he would have them wear maid's outfits, as in a corseted black silk wiggle dress. The corset was enforced with a very heavy stiff canvas enabling very little movement on the torso, perfect for cleaning, complete with white apron and matching headpiece. Operator not working for him anymore. Not working for, but a friend. His family had made millions in real estate. Spoiler, they lose it all by the end of the story. He was friendly and invited me over to spend the night. Middle school. My parents knew them and made some oblique comments about the family, but let me go. It was a huge place, but main house was single story. They only ate takeout, and my friend had a room to himself for entertaining. His sister had one, and the parents had their own. Used golf carts to get around the paved roads of their complex. It was sort of a farm, but not sure it was functioning or not. I think they had horses, but he didn't ride, and his family were all too big to ride. I'm from horse country, so the horses were not weird to me, though they terrify me a little. Looking back, I still can't figure out why they had them. Maybe an investment for racing? We visited some of the other houses they had on the complex. Fully built single family homes that were completely empty. Overall very nice people, but always a bit off to me. Spent money hand over fist, but didn't have a lot of nice things. Went a few times, and then he vanished from the school. It was a private school. Found out later they had lost everything, and had to move into a mobile home. Last I heard they had bounced back, and were doing fine. Might even be friends with him on FB. I worked for a little over 2 years for White Glove Moving Company in Seattle. The particular company catered almost exclusively for the Washington State 1%. Meaning, they would have a few high-end pieces of furniture, rugs, etc. that their interior decorators would procure for them, and we would deliver/assemble/install the items. A few stories. A certain Seattle supersonic sharpshooter from Yukon's designer picked out a absolutely hideous rug for a room just to the left of the foyer, but totally blew it in regards to the dimensions. LSS. She immediately had us reloaded on the truck to take back. But, before we were about to pull off, the wife came home and asked if we could move the Cali King bed in their master bedroom to an opposite wall, and upon picking the mattress/box up, their Bourne collection was right there. Faking VHS joints lol. Great taste in Bourne though. Anyhow, we got the bed moved and had a laugh his finer's wife when she then had Mr. Shuttlesworth himself give us a tour of his man cave. Fact. Awesome. Guy had autograph stuff from and photos with some of the most famous, influential, iconic people of the 20th century. And he tipped well. Loved going to his house. Right down the road from Griffey Jr. I personally never got to do a delivery for the kid, but my coworkers did. Edit. Another interesting move was for Mr. Starbucks Coffee himself. He had a weekend party at his leashy crib and we were called to move the party furniture back out of the room, which was pretty much a large study, I guess you would call it. Well, in this room was one of the most awesome pieces of art I've seen. It was a roughly 12x 18 foot B&W photo of the towers falling on 9/11. It was cool because the photographer who got the lucky shot took it from a ground level angle, pointing up at a man in the foreground who was running away from the billowing smoke/dust with the tower almost halfway down. Sheet was sick. Anyhow, we proceeded to move the party tables/chairs/etc to his faking garage, which stored his Ferrari. Not sure which model as it was covered up. But I won't lie, I secretly wanted to accidentally drop a chair on that damn car so bad. Reason. He had just sold my faking Sonics a few months prior. That's why we had to submit a full background check before even getting assigned the job. Nanny here. In my experience, the richer, the crazier. This all was part of a job interview with a very wealthy family. The dad was a good 20 years older than the stay-at-home mom, looking to pay me an absurd amount of money because she doesn't like playing with/supervising her kid. First time meeting up with the mom was cancelled because her 3-year-old had gotten into her luggage and swallowed a bunch of Tylenol. Then it was uncancelled. He was fine. Okay, whatever. So we meet for lunch at a nice restaurant that I hadn't been to. She gushes over how good the flatbreads are and recommends them to me, then proceeds to order a gluten-free salad and specifically asked for girlfriend dressing. Don't remember too much about that meeting, but she stressed that the family washes their hands every time they enter the house. Second interview, I was invited to the house. The mom texts me beforehand to remind me that I need to wash my hands after entering her house. After I wash my hands in the designated sink, she gives me a tour of the house, making sure to point out there are cameras in each room and a special bathroom for the nannies to use. Yeah, a segregated bathroom. Then at the end of the interview, she keeps offering me steak and wine. Apparently she didn't realize I was underage at the time and needed to drive myself home. I noped TF out of there and never looked back. Late to the party, but whatever. This is worth sharing. I was an au pair in China for 6 months, which is basically a private English teacher who also takes the kids to school and different activities. I lived with 2 families during my time there, and while the second family was really sweet, the first one was interesting to say the least. When I first got there, I ended up in a family consisting of a 9-year-old kid and 2 nannies. The parents worked in a city a few hours away from Beijing, but they still wanted their kids to go to the best school, so they bought an apartment next door to the best school in town for their kid and hired 2 nannies and an au pair to take care of him. I was the 4th au pair in a year, and he was a miserable kid. I honestly feel bad for him. He had 15 extracurricular activities every week, so the kids didn't have a minute to spare outside of school, homework and activities. But you might have noticed that I said kids and not kid, because he had a brother. The brother lived on the other side of town in another apartment with another nanny right next to another school, about a 1-hour subway ride away from his older brother. We once went to that apartment to eat dinner when the mother was in town. Neither me nor the kid saw the dad during these 6 months, and I honestly believe this kid must have had some sort of diagnosis. He acted really strange, even for a 6-year-old. After about 3 months I got a call from the au pair company, and they said that they wanted to meet me after class the day after, a class which we had with an unqualified teacher who sent some questionable messages to a few girls. Apparently the family's contract had ran out, and I was to move out 2 days later, even though the contract stated that both parts should give a 4-week notice for any changes like that. Oh wait, I forgot that I actually never got contract. I had a contract with the family that stated my working hours and spare time, and a contract with the guy who acted as an intermediate back home in Sweden, which was basically his get out of jail card, but nothing with the actual company, which should have been the basis of my visa. In order to get the contract, I had to threaten to sue their guy in Sweden. According to what I signed up for, I was supposed to get all major holidays off among other perks, which the company did not give me. After a lot of bullshit, I decided to quit the company 3 months in advance and told them that if they didn't rewrite their entire contract to actually be a proper contract and give me one which said that I was only supposed to stay there for 6 months, they finally budged after 171 days and did as me and the other au pairs wanted. After that they still tried to trick me out of money, but in the end everything worked out fine. But through all of this I was actually employed by a pretty good company compared to the other major ones. I got to know a guy from another company who told me how he once overheard a family that wanted to terminate the contract and not pay for the remaining time, which the company refused. So the mother then threatened to burn down the company's office, to which the boss responded, "Well, as it is, I know where your daughter goes to school. Wouldn't it be a shame if she one day disappeared?" Now, back to my company. I went to class with maybe 10 other people, and as it turns out I didn't have a bad time. One girl had moved to Beijing from another city because her host dad would get violent and throw plates and stuff across the room. The straw that broke the camel's back was when he one night got pissed drunk, did his usual aggressive routine, and then passed out in the hallway, halfway blocked her door. She then decided to move. Another family had 4 kids, which with the 1-kid policy was incredibly expensive. That family was most likely billionaires, as they owned multiple companies and at least 6 apartments that we knew of in the $5-10 million region. Those kids were constantly spit, bite, kick, punch and yell at the poor au pair, which actually got her to give up on her dreams of becoming a nanny. At least the family would constantly give her free clothes from their clothes store, $1,000 in pocket money when she left, an expensive tea set, an iPhone for Christmas and an iPad as a departing gift, and a brand new suitcase to get all of this back home to England. Another au pair had just gotten to China, spent the first 2 nights in a hostel, and then moved in with a family consisting of the mother in the middle of a divorce and a kid. On his second day in the family, the mother opened a bottle of wine and proceeded to tell her entire life story to the au pair, who basically just sat there and listened to the sad stories. The day afterwards he woke up and heard sobbing coming from the master bedroom. He walked in and found the host mother sitting in her bed crying. He sat down next to her and tried to comfort her, at which point she dragged him in, started to make out with him, and then proceeded to have sex with him, which then continued almost daily for 3 months, before he decided to go back home. My company also put some people in primary schools as English teachers, and they would be spread quite far and wide across China. One girl ended up in a school in a smaller city a few hours away from Beijing, and during their faculty Christmas party she got drugged and raped by her colleague. Even though everyone kind of agreed that he was the perpetrator, she became a pariah, since it was more prestigious to have a male white teacher than a female, and so the entire school protected him. Fortunately her boyfriend was amazing, instantly got on a plane to China, and supported her through this entire process. That's maybe the worst stuff I can remember now after quite a few beers, but there's a whole lot more. I went to the embassy to try to find out what kind of help I could get in a legal battle against a company that tried to bully me out of my money, and now the embassy actually state on their website that many au pairs in China get abused and tricked by companies, so I like to believe that I contributed to that. I don't regret my time in China as it was a good time, but I would definitely not do it again. Not sure if it counts, but me and my dad have done entire buyouts of estates, meaning we get things people wanna sell, then haul away what they don't want to completely clean the place out. Anyways, lady is divorcing her billionaire husband because he was a piece of shit who was drugging the kids, just for sheets and giggles. They rented 2 luxury apartments to live in, each across from the other. First thing that was off, she had to constantly call the husband for a password to open the doors, because he had it hooked up to a computer that changed it every 3 hours. Second thing was the food. One fridge had stereotypical rich person food like caviar, beef Wellington, etc. The other fridge, and all the cabinets on that side of the kitchen in one apartment, was full of junk food and processed meats, cheap people stuff, like food you'd buy at a dollar store. Third, and probably weirdest thing was there was 4 shopping carts in each apartment, because they always rearranged the furniture and used them to move it around somehow. Worked out for us though, because the lady would fill the shopping carts up with stuff she wanted to sell, and be like $40 take all. Made a lot of money off that one. Lots of nice art, sculptures, and trinkets. Also got a beautiful Samsung 65-inch TV that was at the time only 5 weeks old for $300 because her son pressed an ink stamp on the screen and it was bothering her. The TV cost $4,000 plus tax at the time. The lady herself was almost off-puttingly eccentric, like she had caffeine for blood. She was very nice and polite though, and had the body of a slightly younger Pamela Anderson, but with smaller boobs. I'm a professional nanny and most of the families I've worked for long term were upper middle class, not super wealthy, but comfortable. I did occasional weekends for an ultra wealthy family in Dallas. The mom was a stay-at-home mom, but did a lot of social things and charity work. The dad supposedly was a dentist down on the border of Mexico. Even a successful dentist wouldn't make as much as he seemed to make. They were both beautiful, in a very Dallas way. The house was an immaculate mansion, totally over the top with fountains inside and outside the house. I looked up the cost of their house on Zillow, and it was $6 million. I upped my flat rate by $4 an hour. The house was fully staffed. I was one of 8 nannies that rotated throughout the month. They had 3 housekeepers come every day, but Sunday from 9 to 3 p.m. They had a personal on-call chef, and one for their dogs as well. They had a security guard every night from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. They were nice and very generous with money. They'd pay me and then give me a $500 tip. The dad just kept hundreds of dollars in his wallet. I went to their twins' first birthday party, which probably cost about 10 grand, and they tipped all of the staff at the country club $200. They'd order food all the time and were always generous enough to buy me whatever I wanted for dinner. They'd easily order about $500 worth of food and throw 60% of it away. Drove me nuts. The kids were fine 1-year-old twins and a 3-year-old older brother. They strongly preferred the older boy and would take him to the country club on the weekends. I was left with the twins in their playroom, which was tiny and had no windows. I think it was supposed to be a utility closet. The kids couldn't play in other parts of the house. They couldn't even play in their nurseries because they'd break/ruin all the pieces of artwork kept in the room. They also would feed the kids sheet food. You'd think if you were bringing in millions a year you'd buy some organic apples or something, but nope. They'd feed them canned peas, Vienna sausages, Cheetos and fruit cups. They were also always sick. All 3 boys would have diarrhea 5 to 6 times a day the entire time I knew them. I suggested they had a dairy allergy. I was always dismissed. Oh, and they slept all the time. The twins would be in bed from 7:30 am to 7:30 pm, and then nape from 9:30 to 11:30, and then nap from 2:30 to 4:30. It seems like they just had the kids for the family Christmas card and otherwise wanted them out of the way. I have 2 nannies, so I guess we are rich. We are very comfortable, but we spend a full 1/4 of our income on nannies and services for our kids. We have 3 kids, and one has special needs, so he has his own nanny/shadow for school, so we can keep him in a mainstream classroom with extra support, and so she can take him to therapy and extracurricular activities. We also give her a car to drive. While she is working, she drives her own car to our house. I hope that we are good to work for and not too weird. Often, if I get home early from work, I like to relax by myself for a little. While since we are paying the nannies, regardless, if I let them go early, I spend a ton of time with my kids, so I don't feel like this is neglecting them, and I hope the nannies don't think I'm weird for it. I have a few flip side stories. Our first nanny that we ever hired was from Mexico and told us that she only drinks bottled water because the water in Mexico wasn't safe to drink. We told her that we didn't live in Mexico and would not be buying her bottled water. We also offered to pick up food when we go grocery shopping so that she could make herself lunch. We didn't know if that was customary and asked her what she liked. She told us that she wanted tilapia fillet because of her high blood pressure and fresh mangus. We had offered, so we got her some. She proceeded to pan fry the tilapia in oil every day and spent about an hour each day making herself lunch while our kid just sat in a bouncy seat. Needless to say, she didn't last long with us. We had another nanny who got pregnant while she was working for us and would sleep while our kid napped. Totally fine until she started to stay asleep while the kid cried in his crib for 30 to 45 minutes after he woke up. We have nanny cameras. We have had a few really crappy nannies and some really wonderful ones. For the good ones, we do everything in our power to treat them as part of our family and keep them happy. This thread is making me paranoid now.